What's going on, guys? Asian Guy here, bringing you my updated thoughts and opinions on the Raiden Shogun. And please, I have to put this disclaimer out here. Please avoid spoiling things that are tied to the Archon Quest or the Archon Quest trailer. Not everyone has watched them, not everyone's done them, so please be respectful and civil and mindful of others that may or may not have done the Archon Quest already. So no spoilers, guys. I don't want to have to be giving you guys spanks on the bottoms because you guys are not behaving with the spoilers. So, Raiden Shogun has definitely divided opinion. A lot of people, especially vocal people in China, very unhappy with the Raiden Shogun. Not necessarily Raiden in general, but one of her interactions, which I'll touch on. A lot of people think she's fantastic. I personally think she's fantastic and does not need a buff. A lot of people think she needs a buff, or rather Electro needs a buff, and let's really talk about that right now. So, Raiden Shogun, as you guys can see here for me, is talent level 668. Constellation, believe it or not, is still 0, guys. I can unlock Constellation 6, but I've wanted to showcase on twitch.tv/AsianGuyStream what she's capable of at Constellation 0. And of course, the weapon I do have is not the catch, but the Engulfing Lightning. But again, I'd like to reiterate, even though it takes ages to get the catch, it will probably take most people up to 2-3 weeks for the catch, realistically speaking. It's still a fantastic option that is there. Staff of Homer and also the Jade Wing Spear at Refinement Rank 1 can work as well, but you really do want to have very good artifacts if you plan on running these weapons. And surprise, guys, I don't have every single weapon in the game at Refinement Rank 5. Again, contrary to popular belief, I don't Constellation 6 R5 all my characters. So attributes are going to be looking like this, artifacts looking like this, Emblem of Seventh Fate. I have gone with the energy recharge timepiece and the attack percent goblet, and talent levels again 668. These are the stats that I have overall as well. These are Giga Whale artifacts, by the way. Someone who has refilled over and over and over again can achieve these kind of optimal stats. So I would realistically say, and I did touch upon this in my first impressions video, you want to be going for 60% crit rate, 120% crit damage, and something like 230, 240% energy recharge, and I would say you're doing a good job with that in mind. Now, moving away from that, the main thing that is upsetting people about the Raiden Shogun is that her interaction with Beidou is not as expected. In the beta version of the game, Beidou's ultimate, and whenever I say ultimate, I mean elemental burst. Beidou's elemental burst, which is very similar to Xingqiu's in how to trigger it, normal and charge attacks, when they hit, they create a lightning discharge that can jump between opponents, dealing electro damage. Now this, unfortunately, is the very similar wording to Xingqiu. Your active character's normal attacks will trigger consecutive sword rain attacks, dealing hydro damage. Now, Xingqiu works with Raiden during the elemental burst, but Beidou, for some reason, does not. And this inconsistency is upsetting a lot of people, and I won't lie, guys, it pisses me off as well, because as you can see, my Beidou is one away from being crowned. She is Constellation 6, and I do want to play with her as well. I have a full set farm for her as well, and it does upset me that we can't use the two Electro Queens together. Beidou is a problem. The interaction's a problem. Electro right now, I think, is not in a great place. Do I think it needs to be buffed? Not necessarily, no. Would I like to see it buffed? I'd happily accept buffs to it, but I don't think it's necessary in the game. I think it can still do good enough to clear everything in the game right now, so I don't think it's really a problem. I don't really believe this notion of everything has to be equally busted. So for me, I don't think that's too much of a problem. The other things that I don't like about the Raiden Shogun is a lot of her power is locked behind constellations. Now, obviously, I have her I can Constellation 6 her, but I know it's going to be frustrating for a lot of people that it's locked behind that. The other thing is something very similar to Eula, is that the most satisfying part of her kit, which is the burst, is not that practical in the overworld, which is where you're going to be spending most of your time on the game. So when you're running around with Raiden in game and you're charging up her abilities, you have her ultimate ready, her elemental burst. You're not going to use it on a Hilichurl that's going to get killed in one shot and then suddenly your attack string does nothing because there's nothing to hit anymore. It's just very, very sad and unsatisfying because there are no enemies that can take the build up. So while you're building up this big unga bunga drop of damage, everything dies immediately and then you're hitting nothing really, which is the same problem that Eula had. Now, speaking of Eula, Raiden works very, very well with Eula. One of the best ideal characters to be running with Eula. Great energy battery, great for superconduct, etc., etc. But not everyone has Eula. And something I want to talking about Eula and Raiden is hindsight, right? A lot of people, when Eula came out, clunky. She was not good enough. Her damage is not great. Her DPS is not great. She's a damage per screenshot character. I think Raiden kind of falls into that same category where in the future, we're going to get content that matches the needs of these characters to make them more meta and more relevant to the content. And people are going to suddenly be like, oh, actually, this character's pretty darn good. So hindsight is something that's very interesting because I like to take you all the way back to when, you know, Xiangling wasn't the meta, when people thought Xingqiu and also Bennett were garbage characters. And with time, people have really come to understand how to utilize these characters' full potential. And I think that a lot of people are still sleeping on Raiden. And in the future, people are going to see what she's really, really capable of. I don't even see the full picture yet. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some genius out there, probably from the China server, that's going to work it out, what the best team, what the best rotation for Raiden is going to be. Right now, lots of people are jumping to conclusions, whether it's false, whether it's true, whether it's accurate, inaccurate, and whether it's practical, which is the most important thing, is practicality. And with practicality, what I mean is, a lot of people are obsessed with the mathematical formula of what's most mathematical optimal for your teams and your rotations. But the reality is, the most important thing in this formula, if you're going to be using maths to define how good a character is, and this is a variable that not enough people talk about, is the player. The player skill, the player preference, what device is the player on, what's their ping on. Because what maths typically doesn't tell you, and is not obvious to a lot of people who are looking at it from the outside in, is you have to play like an absolute godlike machine. If you make a mistake, well, that doesn't go into the formula. Every time you fail a run with the most efficient or the most hyper optimal team, you don't take that into consideration for the formula. You don't take that into consideration. Oh yeah, that's a DPS loss because actually it's taken me 10 minutes to clear this floor with this team because I don't have a shield or because I don't have a healer that will keep me alive to suit my player needs and my player skill. So that's something that you have to take with a pinch of salt when it comes to theory crafting and maths, guys. They can give you the mathematically most optimal team and rotation. Is it the realistically and most practical rotation? For most people, no. And this is evident because most people play with Zhongli. Zhongli is amazing because he makes and trivializes so much content in the game. Now, a lot of theory crafters will tell you Zhongli is not great because in their minds, they can only see playing like a machine. Even though they might themselves not be playing like a machine, they're just completely forgoing all their failed runs, all their failed attempts, and not considering that as damage per second or time wasted. And it really depends on how you look at things, and I think that's absolutely okay. Both sides are fine in believing what they want to believe. If you enjoy going for the mathematical optimal and still failing over and over again, wasting time, that's okay. If you can play like a machine and use the mathematical optimal, that's fantastic as well. If you can play like a machine and still play with garbage characters and non-optimal characters, that's great as well. And if you're just garbage at the game like me and want to play with characters that will trivialize stuff, or you want to wail on the game to trivialize content, that's also okay as well. Ultimately, as long as you're enjoying the game and you're pulling for the characters you like because you like them, not because someone told you they're mathematically optimal, or not because someone told you you should be playing my way, not your way, and not being a sheep. As long as you're not being a sheep, guys, and you're making the decisions for yourself, hats off to you. Now, the pros of Baal, because I went on a big tangent there, is that I think she's very flexible. She can go into loads of different teams and work very well. And I think that's a huge, huge, huge plus. A lot of people think that's a huge, huge, huge minus in that she can go into a lot of different teams, but she won't be the best support in that team. And for me, I don't understand this mentality where people are insistent on comparing everyone to Bennett, comparing everyone to Xingqiu. Because if you do that, no character other than maybe Zhongli, no character other than maybe Kazuha or Venti or Xiangling or Ganyu is really going to compare to these two characters in terms of flexibility, in terms of how many teams they can fit into. These two, Xingqiu and Bennett, are just giga chads. And the plus side of having Baal or Raiden Shogun is that you can use them all. You can put them on different teams. You can have variation of characters that all do a fantastic job. And the thing with Raiden Shogun is that she can go into just as many teams, and at the same time she can output a ridiculous amount of damage for people who are F2P and even low spenders. I don't understand this narrative of people saying she doesn't do enough damage, because she does damage. She does damage, and I will show you guys some footage of if you want to build her to do damage, she can do damage. If you want to run her with a bit of Unga Bunga, you can run her with a bit of Unga Bunga as well. And she is a very, very forgiving character to play with. She doesn't get interrupted. You can run her with healers, you can run her with shields, and she just fits into so many different teams. And I think that's very forgiving. It means your investment is not wasted, because, for example, a character like, let's say, Venti is a fantastic character when he's relevant. When Venti is not relevant, let's say because all the enemies we fight in challenging content are suddenly giant enemies that are huge, or they're enemies that dash around and avoid Venti's ultimate or elemental burst, people will not use Venti because it's impractical and it's just inconvenient. People will then gravitate towards Kazuha instead. So having both of them is great. And this is the thing I wanted to emphasize again, is you don't have to make your own characters compete with one another. You can use them together. You can rotate between them. You can use them both at different times if you want to. And this is the same thing with Baal. Flexibility is the absolute kingpin in this game by my standards. If you are a flexible character, I will give you so many bonus points, because it means you can work for high skilled players, low skilled players, whether you have great artifacts, whether you have bad artifacts, whether your other characters have good or bad artifacts, or good weapons or bad weapons, which is the same thing universally for every character. Is even your Bennett, your Xingqiu, they still have to be built. They have to be well built to get the most out of them. If you want to make them really, really useful, you want to have 5-star weapons on them. You want to have an R5 sacrificial sword. You want to have an R5 Favoni sword or some energy recharge sword on some of these characters. And these are not F2P friendly means either. This ancient narrative that these characters are only, or they're really, really good because they're great at level 60 or level 70 at low levels, I kind of rubbish that, because I think most players, if they really care about a character, will take them the distance to level 80 out of 90 minimum, and then make the best usage out of them at that point. And this is no different for Baal. This is no different for many of the characters in the game. You need to invest in them to get the most out of them. I think a lot of people are looking at Baal at low investment, or looking at Raiden Shogun at low investment or subpar investment, and then comparing them to their other characters that they own, which have already been fully invested into. And I believe that in the future, we will have theory crafters that will come out, and likewise to Bennett, likewise to Xingqiu, likewise to Xiangling, show that these characters are really, really good, and not just viable. Because in the past, Bennett was what? C tier. Everyone thought Bennett was C tier. So many people thought Xingqiu was just garbage. People had Chi-Chi in S tier, because she just did lots of early game healing. Hindsight, guys, is what's going to make things interesting. And with Raiden Shogun, I think she's incredibly future-proof, which is, again, something people don't take into consideration. Is, let's say from now on, every single character we get gets gradually higher energy. Maybe they're all 80 energy cost, 60 energy cost, 100 energy cost. Who knows what we're going to get? Baal, Raiden Shogun is going to do a good job with all of them. This is going to not be great for everyone else, whereas Raiden is still going to benefit and benefit and benefit and benefit. And I also think Spiral Abyss right now is kind of unfair, in the sense that it's not very great for Raiden Shogun. Floor 12 has electro armor and electro resistance, so I would not be surprised if in the future iterations of Spiral Abyss, we're going to get energy recharge focused ones where she's going to shine. A lot of supports are going to shine. The Emblem of Severed Fate set is going to shine, which is another bonus she has. Is not only does she have a great 4-star polearm, she also has a great artifact set to farm, which is hyper efficient to farm for the people who want to be hyper efficient, because that set is good for Xingqiu, it's good for Xiangling, it's good for Bennett, it's good for it's good for a lot of different characters in the game right now. That Shimenawa's version side is good for Yoimiya as well. It can even be used for Ganyu, it can be used for Shao if you want to be a little bit copium. It's great for Beidou. There's just so many different characters that you can use that artifact set on. I'm just taking a look here. Even Kaya can make use of that set. So that set in general is very good. Or those two sets in general are very, very, very good to farm. And I do think that she is F2P friendly. Some people are crucifying me for saying she's F2P friendly, mainly because her constellations give her a big power spike. But even with an F2P setup, if you crown her talents, or if you crown her elemental burst, she can deal some of the highest damage F2P players will ever see with an F2P weapon. And I don't understand this narrative that she's not doing enough damage when she's not a DPS character. She is not meant to be like a main damage dealing character, like a Diluc, like a Hu Tao. And like the comparisons are kind of wild for me, because she's being compared to all kind of different characters, which for me is, it depends. Are you half glass full or half glass empty? Because to be compared to all of these characters is saying something. It's saying you're a jack of all trades. And that's a very good thing. And that is why, for me, she is a fantastic character. I think her numbers are fine. I think she does great. She's very forgiving to play. Her elemental skill cooldown is very forgiving. She's unga bunga. Even if you don't know what you're doing with her, she will still perform well. And this is the same thing with characters like, I'm going to show you this page, guys, of the most used characters in Spiral Abyss. Zhongli, number 1. Not surprising. Kazuha, unsurprisingly, second place, most used character in Spiral Abyss. Then we have Bennett, we have Ayaka, we have Xingqiu, we have Hu Tao, and then Ganyu. Again, no surprises there. You've got the 4 support characters there who are just super universal, super flexible. And then you have 3 hyper DPS characters or hyper carries there. And then we've got Venti there. Again, not surprising, only above 60%, because a lot of characters or a lot of players will not feel comfortable using Venti against these samurai, or against these monsters that have very, very heavy weights and cannot be actually crowd controlled by Venti. Then we've got Eula, we've got Diona, we've got all these characters here, and Bao has already made her way up here after 3 days. She's on the way here. Now, this is not a validation of whether a character is good or not. What this means is, out of the number of people using these characters, how useful or how reliant are they on these characters? And for me, it's no surprise that Zhongli and Kazuha are all the way up here, because they're very easy to use, they're very forgiving to use. You don't need to have super efficient builds on them. Zhongli, stack full HP. Kazuha, stack full EM. It's very basic, it's very straightforward. Their gameplay is satisfying, their gameplay is simple, and I think Bao will eventually see herself up in this row here. And there's some big hitters in here. You got Venti, you got Eula, Diona, Mona. I'm actually surprised Albedo is here, but you got Xiangling, and you got Xiao in here. And maybe, I think it's possible she will go past the 70% mark as well, because I think she's so flexible, she can fit into so many different teams, and I do think most players are happy with where she's at right now. I know a lot of people want to see Electro buffed. I will welcome it. I don't think it's necessary. I would love to see the Beidou interaction fixed with her. It's not necessarily even fixed, because they have changed the wording on her Constellation 6 with Bao, which is a big stinker. If you take a look here, Wishbearer, while in the ultimate or while in the elemental burst state, attacks by the Raiden Shogun that are considered part of her elemental burst will decrease all blah 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 blah. So it's basically saying the trigger is her elemental burst damage. Before, this says normal attacks, charge attacks, plunge attacks, which would have meant that Beidou should be working with Raiden Shogun here. And unfortunately, that is not the case. So because of that update, which I believe was 2 days ago now, I think it's confirmed it is intended that Beidou is not meant to be working with the Raiden Shogun. I think the reason why they did that is because it would be too strong. The 2 Electro Queens together would simply be way too strong. And I think that's what turned MiHoYo off from it. I don't understand why, because we have way stronger combos out there. Well, I wouldn't know, because maybe this combo is super strong, and I just don't know how strong it is, and I'm underestimating it. But I feel like we've got plenty of other combos there in the game, which are fantastic as well. So I don't see why they had to make it so that, you know, Beidou doesn't work with Raiden, which is a real big shame. But for me, Raiden, still in the top 5 characters. Again, contesting that 5th place slot. It really depends on what the rotation of the Spiral Abyss is, with Venti and with Xiangling. To be honest, I would put Xiangling in 5th place right now with the current rotation of Spiral Abyss. Venti for me is, because there's a lot of heavy enemies, I would say I would put Venti down. Ganyu, I think, is the best DPS character in the game. But Ganyu is a personal preference thing. A lot of people will not like to play with a bow character or aim with her, and she's not necessarily super forgiving either. So again, that's a personal preference thing. And going back to personal preference, please guys, always summon for characters you enjoy. Because most characters can play with one another. Most characters are viable together. And yeah, I hope you guys learned something from the video, or maybe thought a little bit differently about something you thought about previously. And feel free to leave some comments in the comment section down below discussing your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day, and bye bye.